What's up everyone, Coach Tony from the Strength House. I'm gonna take you through the trap bar deadlift, talk about the setup, talk about the execution, and talk about some common problems that we see and how to fix them. So the trap bar deadlift is probably the most accessible of all the bar related deadlifts for people who are athletes, people who are just general strength enthusiasts, and even competitive powerlifters during an off season as an accessory lift. So with the deadlift, you typically want to look at your setup from both the front and from the side to get things organized. We're going to talk about the front first. So stance width is really important. You generally want to start with your feet right under your hips or perhaps a little bit narrower. A good place to start is if you were to try to jump as high as you could, where would you place your feet? And that's probably going to be your best deadlift position. With trap bar, you don't want to get too wide. Because those handles obviously are in one place. So if you try to get your feet out too wide, your hands are gonna get in the way, and that's just not gonna be the most advantageous position anyways. So feet on the narrower side for sure. And then we wanna get them front to back, centered right with the middle of the handles. So once you've got your feet set, footwear is important here. If you're using like a shoe with a heel lift or just a shoe with a lot of give, like a running shoe, not gonna be the best type of footwear to put force into the ground. So having some sort of flat shoe like a Chuck Taylor or some sort of like Reebok training shoe that you typically see, or just no shoes at all, probably your best bet for any type of deadlift. So first things first, I wanna connect my feet to the ground by having what we call a tripod foot. So that's having pressure on your big toe, your pinky toe, and your heel, basically just so you don't roll into your instep. So we don't wanna roll to the outsides of our feet, we don't wanna roll to the insides of our feet, we just wanna have good pressure. You wanna think almost like a tree, like putting roots into the ground. Once I've got that good foot pressure, I'm gonna already kind of start to feel my glutes tense up, which is great because as I start to sit back, I'm gonna push my hip backwards until I can grab the bar. And once I'm there, I probably should have a decent hip starting position, but I'm gonna turn to the side here so we can kind of see what that's gonna look like, because the back position in the deadlift is something that everybody's concerned with, both from a safety perspective and from the ability to lift a lot of weight. So I got my feet set, my foot width where I want, connecting to the ground. I'm gonna sit my hips back with a little bit of knee bend. So I don't wanna lock my legs and go back like this, but I also don't want to squat into it with my knees way forward. Somewhere in the middle is your best bet. So I like to start with a little bit of knee bend, push my hips back so I can feel my hamstrings, and then I should be able to get my hands to a good position with my back nice and flat. Now, if you start to sit back and you feel like you're sitting as far back as you can, as far back as your hips will allow, but you still can't get your hands to the bar, then it's okay from here to bend the knees a little bit so I can get my back flat. What's nice about a trap bar deadlift is you have a little bit more leeway as far as your torso position compared to a straight bar deadlift. So with a straight bar deadlift, obviously the bar is blocking your knees in front of you, so you can only push your knees forward so much. With the open-ended nature of a deadlift, of a trap bar, you can get a little bit more of a knee dominant position if you want to have your knees forward a little bit more and torso a little more upright. Or you could have a little bit more of a pure hip hinge, a little bit more of a high hip position, what might look like more like an RDL. It's kind of up to you. If you're trying to maintain the benefits of a deadlift, you shouldn't get really squatty with it and have your knees way forward and butt down nice and low. That's gonna be more like a squat and not what we're looking for. However, you can ease more in that direction if it fits your body type. All right, so you'll find that hip position, that starting hip position that works for you. As long as your hips are above your knees, it's good to go. And now, the real challenge of a trap bar compared to a straight bar is creating that lat tension. With a straight bar with the bar in front of you, it's very simple to pull the bar into your shins and take the slack out. There is no slack in a trap bar, but you want to try to do the same thing. And what it's going to look like with a trap bar is less of a pulling the bar backwards and more of taking your armpits and tucking them in very close to your sides, as if you're trying to touch your elbows to your ribs. Or another way to think of it is taking the pits of your elbows and turning them forward. So if I'm facing towards the camera, if I set up with poor lat tension, the pits of my elbows are gonna be facing each other. If I create good lat tension, the pits of my elbows are gonna face the camera, and I'm gonna feel that right here. That's what's gonna lock in that straight upper back. It's gonna lock in a good solid torso position so that I don't round my back as I start the deadlift. Like with any other deadlift, if I don't have the appropriate level of hamstring tension and lat tension, I might start in what looks like a good position, but as soon as I go to lift the bar, my hips are gonna shoot up and my back is gonna round. So I wanna make sure I have good hamstring tension to get the lower body locked in, good lat tension to get the upper body locked in, and then I can just push down through the ground with my feet and have my hips and shoulders rise together. So combination of hamstrings and lats to lock myself in. That's gonna make sure that I keep a good back position throughout the deadlift. Now, some common problems that we see with the trap bar, like any other deadlift, hips shooting up, back rounding, just like I talked about. A little bit harder to lock in that starting position because of the open-ended nature, so you just have to pay that much more attention to it. The other thing that we see is because there's no bar blocking your knees in the front, you tend to see two things happen when you initiate the trap bar deadlift. The first is that we'll go from this good hip dominant position, but as you start the lift, the knees are gonna push forward, the back is gonna round a little bit, and then you'll be able to lift the bar as the weight shifts more into your quads. We wanna be really careful with that. So you don't wanna start your deadlift by having that shift forward and then go. If that's happening, you're probably starting with your hips too low, or your hamstrings simply aren't strong enough to maintain that position with the weight that's on the bar, and you should reduce the weight. Similar to that, we'll often see, because there's nothing blocking you in the front, people will overdo their lockout, and they'll stand up and they'll swing their hips through too much. And instead of finishing with the glutes, you finish with the lower back. So it's important to only stand up until you're tall and your glutes are squeezed. So a good finish position is right here. So I'm tall, glutes are squeezed. I don't have to throw my hips through all the way because there's no bar blocking my hips in the front. We'll go back to the front view real quick. Another common trap bar deadlift error, perhaps more common in the trap bar deadlift than in a straight bar deadlift, is knees caving in. Again, because it's easy to shift that weight into a more knee dominant position. So if I'm finding that at the start of the lift, my hips are scooping and my knees are shifting forward, we'll often also see the knees start to cave in. So similar fix, just start with your hips in a higher position with more hamstring tension. You may also be starting with your feet too wide. If your feet are on the wider side, sometimes the knees have nowhere to go but in. If you simply move your feet a little closer together and pay attention to rooting into the floor and having that good, strong connection to the ground, that can help you prevent those knees from crashing in as you deadlift. All right, so that's a quick rundown of the trap bar deadlift, common setup issues and ways to correct them.